Good morning, everybody. The Senate Finance Committee, Friday, May 15th, 2020, will come to order. Members, we have two bills on the agenda. We have Senate File 1456, Senator Senjem's Clean Energy First Bill, and Senator Osmek's Senate File 2084, the RDA, the Rural Development Account Bill. And we have till about 10 o'clock to finish both of these bills. This perhaps might be our last hearing of the year, members, just to let you know that. So Senator Senjem, you're up first, and you have possibly two amendments. Is that correct? Welcome, Senator Senjem, and you're gonna have to unmute. There you go. All right. Welcome, Senator Senjem.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and perhaps Senate Council can help me with those amendments. I know what they are, but I don't know the numbers in terms of offering them up. The first one has to do with the elimination of the host city provision within the bill. The host city provision has to do with what happens to a utility city when a utility closes down. How does the city move in to help them? There was some costs associated with that. There's probably not going to be any utilities closing within the framework of the near future. And Senator Housley has that bill, by the way, and it was funded the other day through the RDA. And so I don't think for this time and purpose we need it in this bill. And so the First Amendment having to do with the host city provision we can eliminate. I just don't know, Madam Chair, what the number is offhand.
Okay. Senator Senjem, I don't think we have a quorum yet,
Okay.
but if
we just received a quorum, Senator.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Graduate. So we do have a quorum. I think I'll let you run through your bill and then we'll add these amendments.
Okay.
And go to the testifiers and members. You have quite a bit of information from people that have sent support and information all along here. I don't see anything opposed yet that has come through, but Senator Senjem.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. So Senate File 1456 is something I have been working on since April of 2018, actually 2 years. Put a lot of work into this bill, frankly, proud of the bill. Goal, of course, is to give it a chance to get to the floor and see what happens after that. This bill passed out of the Energy Committee in 2019 and was frankly referred to Finance towards the end of the 2019 session. You were very busy. We didn't push it with respect to getting a hearing at that point. And frankly, we brought it back during the summer of 2019 and actually did some more work on it. And it was good, productive work, I thought. We did then at the beginning of this session refer it back to the Energy Committee. That summer work was worked through within the Energy Committee, and once again it passed out of the Energy Committee to the Finance Committee. It passed out, Madam Chair, with all Republican votes and 2 out of 4 of the Democratic votes. So pretty, reasonably speaking, a good bipartisan effort with respect to the passage. So what is the bill, members? The bill is relatively simple in its concept, and I don't know if you have a sheet like this in front of you or not, but this is the little chart we put together to diagrammatically show the nature of the bill. The bill simply says as a utility, and by the way, this pertains for the most part only to investor-owned utilities. So we're talking about Xcel, Otter Tail, Minnesota Power. We're talking about those 3 within the state of Minnesota, who are chiefly regulated, obviously, by the Public Utilities Commission. So as these utilities would have need for bringing forth a resource, what they call a resource plan to the Public Utilities Commission, is a fairly routine process for these organizations, as they do. And as that plan calls for the need of more energy, either because of the retirement of a power plant or because of a larger load that's accrued for some particular reason, as more energy is required, the utility needs to approach the Public Utilities Commission with a clean energy first option. And clean energy, if you look at that chart, is described as nuclear, solar, wind, hydro, carbon sequestration, and municipal solid waste. And one that's not on there, but it's in the bill, is geothermal. That's an emerging clean technology. So those choices are available to the utility to present to the commission if they have additional needs for electrical generation and, of course, sales of that electrical source. If the utility believes that to do this, to move into a clean energy option, is not either affordable or reliable, the Public Utilities Commission, working with the utility, has the option of excusing the clean energy first option. So I would say, Madam Chairman, as opposed to many of the bills that other states are doing, and we call them license plate, or pardon me, bumper sticker bills, which simply say 100% by 2050, and really don't set forth any kind of a path in terms of how they get there. This bill moves us towards a clean energy future, but provides that if that clean energy future is not ready in terms of affordability or reliability, then there are off-ramps, and that clean energy option can be excused by the Public Utilities Commission going forward. So that's an important element of this bill, perhaps the most important element. In addition to that, we did take, or will take, ultimately the host community provision out of it, and it is in Senator Housley's bill, so we're covered there. There's a transmission planning provision within the bill that says, obviously, if you're going to have renewable energy, you have to have an ability to move it. And we do have certainly MISO now, and they work, but there's going to be needs as renewable energy future accrues to have more transmission, more distribution, and so on. So there's a planning process identified within the bill to do that. In addition to that, as this almost near revolution occurs, and more of this kind of utility is put into place, there's a provision which actually prescribes that local workers be given first choice. As much of the work that's been occurring around Minnesota has, and even my particular area in the Rochester area, you will see on these sites many workers, many license plates from Texas, from California, and so on and so forth. We'd like to, and this bill prescribes that the workers that work on this kind of a utility as it grows are Minnesota workers for the most part. The bill prescribes 150 miles within the site. That's how we attempt to do that. It's not perfect, but it will drive the utilities more and more towards using Minnesota workers. So that's the nature of the bill, the standpoint of the resource planning effort, the whole issue of how does the Public Utility Commission identify whether that resource plan calling for that renewable energy source really will work. They have the affordability and the reliability off ramps. If in fact it is not affordable or it cannot be reliable, the utility is not necessarily forced to go that direction. So that is the nature of the bill in terms of its concept. And let me just say, in terms of why I'm doing this bill, on a personal basis, I see it as the future. This country, this world is in an energy transition, and I think Minnesota needs to recognize this. There are social expectations out there that we all know about relative to energy and the clean energy future, and the clean environment future, sustainability, all those words. This bill, in my belief, fits within the framework of that. Many of our major corporations, even here in Minnesota, strive to be green. In fact, a number of them buy, in fact, clean energy within the framework of this United States grid to, in fact, claim that they are a clean energy corporation. If you know anything about the Google proposal up at Becker, they would not come to Minnesota but for the fact that they were supplied clean energy. So that is the tone out there, and that is how I see it. In addition to that, there's all kinds of polls which you might suspect that people are asked about this question: what about clean energy? And And be it Republican or Democrat, it's generally speaking 65 to 80% approval on a clean energy future by any party person. That is frankly, when in the privacy of a poll, that's the way it comes out. But aside from that, if we didn't, in fact, believe in it from the standpoint of just it being our future, the future with respect to our utility in Minnesota, utilities, is just simply this. Within 20 years or so, maybe except for Monticello, we can expect that most of the utilities making electricity for us today will not be running. They are going to either age out, or in fact, they are going to not be competitive on the market, and they are going to close for market sources. The case in point, big as it is, and I don't know if any of you have been to the Coal Creek plant north of Bismarck that Great River Energy owns. They announced last week that they are closing shop on that major facility. Why are they doing it? It's the economics of energy. They cannot run a coal-fired power plant as cheaply as, in fact, they could use renewable energy and natural gas. The coal is no longer competitive. So for reasons of obsolescence and, in fact, market, we are not going to have the traditional kind of power plants that we have in Minnesota in 2040. Most of you, perhaps, or some of you maybe don't know, Prairie Island is scheduled by permit to close in 2030. As far as I know, through all of our discussions, Xcel Energy does not has no interest in taking that much beyond that. There's been in the paper the Monticello plant. I think they're going to ask for a 10-year extension on that one, again, to bridge the gap that Xcel Energy needs. And you probably all heard about their ambitions, and that is they're very strong, perhaps lead the world in terms of their renewable energy initiatives relative to percentages of energy from renewable sources. So again, if we're going to lose all our power plants in Minnesota, what are we going to do? There's really no option other than go to these energy sources I just mentioned, either new nuclear, that's probably not going to happen, wind, solar, hydro, perhaps geothermal. Some people say carbon capture might be a bridge, but the energy sources that we have today are not going to be with us, and we're going to have to make some moves. There's just simply no reason about that. In addition to that, Madam Chair, and we have not emphasized this a great deal in this bill, but the whole subject of climate change is certainly out there. We hear about it every day. There's very strong feelings about that on both sides of, if you will, that spectrum. But it's out there, and it's of great interest to a lot of people. There is a lot of interest in clean energy and the effect, perhaps, of the energy and the related pollutants to climate change. And of course, this bill aims to certainly reduce that to some great extent. And let me just emphasize, energy is a transition. You cannot necessarily say we're going to be we're dirty today and we're going to be clean tomorrow. This is going to happen over a couple of decades, and this is what this bill calls for. So, Madam Chair, with that, I just maybe want to go through the bill in by section very quickly, if I could. And I'm going to use the summary sheet that our Senate Counsel has provided. And I'm not sure if you have that.
Yes, we do.
I'll just go through it as best I can. And so Section 1 relates to rates, and it directs the Public Utilities Commission to set rates based on cost of service with considerations of other non-cost factors, including two elements: economic growth and job retention. And so as they set rates, the Public Utility Commission should consider those two additional factors. There's another sentence in the bill, however, that's not new. Any doubt, it says, with respect to this whole issue of rates always needs to be resolved in favor of the consumer. So again, this bill intends to always favor the consumer and to set those rates at a competitive and fair level, always recognizing that the rates and how people perceive rates is very important. It requires that the PUC allow the Public Utility Commission to recover any positive book value from a generating facility if the PUC orders the Public Utility Commission to, or the Public Utility to terminate their operation. I don't know that that's ever happened in Minnesota, but should that happen, there's a provision here that would allow the recovery of the book value. It talks about the Public Utilities Commission being able to allow the public utility recovery expenses from ratepayers for efforts related to maximizing employment of local workers. We talked about that a little bit. It requires an investor-owned utility to petition the PUC for approval of a new demand-side management program, which would allow compensation for reducing demand of energy in particular. In other words, if you have a high energy day and you ask the customer to reduce their load, if you will, the utility can compensate them, that particular entity from with respect to the amount of energy that they reduced, and that helps in terms of what we call peak and so on. I won't get too far into that. The commission authority allows the PUC to approve or disapprove investments and expenditures to satisfy the renewable energy standards, to include those made to upgrade or otherwise modify transmission facilities. And so again, expenditures of money for transmission, which is important, allows the utility to recover costs incurred by the utility for the efforts to maximize, again, employment of local workers, requires the PUC to take reasonable actions to ensure renewable energy statutes is implemented in the nature to benefit local workers. There's some definition sections here. One on preference, and this goes back to what I just talked about. Madam Chair, can you see me?
Yes.
Something happened. I am on a Google screen.
Okay.
All right.
Oh,
so there's again, going back to the whole issue of preferences, and again, the preference being clean energy, except for affordability and reliability. I won't go into that anymore. More on local job creation. There's a provision here that allows the Commissioner of Commerce to enter into a resource planning efforts with respect to best practices. There's the nuclear moratorium on here, which may be a big deal to some. It's more symbolic, perhaps. Xcel Energy told us the other day they have no plans at all. Again, going back to the economics of energy to ever build a large nuclear power plant again in Minnesota. And then there's a coordinated energy transmission study that's part of this, working with MISO. So, so that is in essence the bill. Let me just conclude by saying, for some, this is perhaps not pure enough, but I would say transition is something that is the nature of, in fact, moving off the traditional forms of energy into renewable energy. This is a transition. It's not flipping a switch and going from one to another. The bill does not, again, force any utility to close a plant. It simply says first option, if you need new energy, is clean energy, except with affordability and reliability. For some, perhaps it's too pure, and the whole issue, well, it will cost too much. Well, again, I will just go back to last week and Great River Energy and the closure of the Coal Creek plant, a major facility, 11 stories high, right in the middle of a lignite field. That particular plant cannot compete economically anymore with renewable energy and natural gas. And they are clothing this. It's a major, of course, effect on that whole area from the standpoint of workers and their future. They're walking away from a major plant. In fact, it says in the paper they're willing to give it away. So remember, that's the bill. Again, we're not going to change our energy patterns overnight with respect to clean energy. I ask for your consideration here. This again has been vetted twice by the Energy Committee. It's got, frankly, extensive review. I would simply ask that you consider it. The majority of people in Minnesota favor clean energy. There's no question about it. That is our future, and that is, again, the direction of energy, not only in Minnesota, across the United States and worldwide. So thank you, Madam Chair. I'll stand for any questions. Peter Mavis, by the way, there's Peter. Is on me. He's my lifeline today if we get into some technical questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Senjem, and welcome, Mr. Mavis. I think we'll wait for the questions, and I see Commissioner Kelly is online too. Good morning, Commissioner. I would first like to get your bill in order if we could.
Sure.
And we have the A56 amendment. Senator Ingebrigtsen, would you mind moving the A56 amendment?
Yes, I'd move the A56.
Thank you. Ms. Fontaine, to the A56 amendment, it's just, and then we're going to turn to you after we adopt these amendments for some fiscal narrative.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Is this a delete all? No?
No, this
No.
is an appropriation, 119 in 2020 and 59,000. Ms. Fontaine, can you explain the amendment?
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I think Casey Mumm is also on the call. If he could explain this one,
yes,
I think he might have drafted this one, or
Yes.
Eric Nauman.
I'm sorry. Yes. Mr. Mumm.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this amendment would appropriate money to the Departments of Commerce and the Public Utilities Commission to cover costs that were identified in a fiscal note for the bill. However, the fiscal note that aligns with these costs, the amounts in this amendment, was to an earlier engrossment of the bill. So I want the chair and members to be aware of that discrepancy.
Senator
Madam
Senjem.
Chair? Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Senjem.
I will stand corrected, but I believe these costs can be assessed back to the utilities and not an effect of the general fund. Is that correct, Mr. Mumm, or anyone else?
Mr. Mumm.
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator Senjem, these appropriations would be accessible to the utilities that are regulated by the department and the Public Utilities Commission.
Commissioner Kelly, can you verify, please, your approval of the A56 amendment and your... Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Certainly, we agree with Mr. Mumm that expenses related to this are accessible. I might ask Ms. Burdette, because I'm not familiar with the specific provision that these appropriations are related to, whether we have any concerns related to them. I do not think that we do.
Okay. Ms. Burdette. Ms. Burdette, could you quickly give us reference?
Good morning. This is Jessica Burdette with the Department of Commerce. I believe the fiscal note for the first engrossment that was drafted was pertaining to the Integrated Resource Plan Biennial Conference that the Commissioner of Commerce could convene, as well as other staffing related costs for the coordinated transmission study and analytical work for resource plans.
And so that is appropriate for this bill that's before us at this time. Is that right, Ms. Burdette?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Okay. Any questions on the A56 amendment, members?
Madam Chair?
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
I don't have the documents, I'm sorry, in front of me here. Can you tell me what the overall cost is before I...
Yeah. Yes, it's 119,000 in fiscal year 2020 and 59,000 in fiscal year 2021 from the general fund to the Department of Commerce for implementing the relevant provisions. And then paragraph B is 173,000 in 2020 and the same for 2021. Appropriate from the general fund to the PUC for implementing the relevant provisions. And it sounds like, Mr. Mumm?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just want to call attention that the A58 amendment has now been posted by Jessica. It's a slightly different version of the A56 amendment to reflect difference in fiscal years and slightly different amounts that are appropriated. So I believe she's posted that now.
Okay, well, while everybody gets that pulled up, Um,
Chair, it might be helpful for a
Mr.
little.
Nauman.
It might be helpful, Madam Chair, members, for a little bit of context. Last night, as we were preparing for the meeting, we were made aware that the Legislative Budget Office had not yet completely signed off on the final version of the fiscal notice prepared by the Department of Commerce. It's my understanding the the Public Utilities piece of the fiscal note had been finalized, but that there was some back and forth. I think I'd contextualize it as some collegial conversations about what the appropriate numbers to be reflected in the fiscal note should be, and that the LBO had some ongoing questions. So a decision was needed on the part of the fiscal staff about which fiscal note to provide the committee. In the end, we took the relatively unusual step of bringing forth the preliminary note because it seemed for use for the committee, under the proviso that it's essentially a first draft of the language that you have in front of you, but we think the costs are more closely aligned and the fiscal years are more closely aligned with what the committee actually has in front of it. We do understand that the LBO has some ongoing questions about the actual pricing, but we think that the numbers are relatively close to what will be finalized. But I just want to make sure the committee knows this is a little bit of an unusual circumstance in terms of the fiscal note. And we think the A58 amendment is closest to what will ultimately be finalized.
Okay, it has been sent to you, members, and it has been posted. So
Madam
I've been-
Chair? Inge here.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Yes. You know, with some of this uncertainty here, I'm not sure that I would be the one to move this amendment. But if it's going to get the bill in order the way the author wants it, that's fine. But I am concerned about the costs here. That seems to be a little bit up in the air. But I got some other questions later.
Sure. So I do want to know if these costs can be absorbed by the Department of Commerce and the PUC. We've been fairly consistent in our message, Senator Senjem, about no to any general fund spending. Is this something that we can
Madam Chair,
be absorbed?
Madam Chair, it's been my belief that these are accessible back to the utilities.
Okay.
Madam,
Senator Benson?
Madam Chair, to the fiscal note, then, if it's accessible back to the utility, there'd be zero fund impact. So the Department of Commerce is telling us they cannot absorb these costs and they cannot pass them on. That's what the fiscal note says.
Madam Chair.
Senator Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The costs that we're dealing with now, I'm not sure with the A58 if we are dealing with 146 and 137 in addition to the costs that were being discussed in A56 or not. I'm beginning to get confused and I apologize.
No,
So maybe
that's fine.
we could straighten that out. If Mr. Mum could answer that, then I've got a couple of other questions on the A58, if I may.
Thank you. Mr. Mum?
Madam Chair, Senator Newman, no, these costs would not be in addition to the amounts in the A58 amendment. They would supersede the amounts in the A58. What you see, or in the A56, what you see in the A58 would be the amounts appropriated.
Very good, Madam Chair.
Senator Newman?
Mr. Mum, what does the phrase in fiscal year 2022 and beyond, the base for the Public Utilities Commission is increased by $55,000? What does that mean?
Mr. Mum?
Madam Chair and Senator Newman, that is the ongoing cost that the Public Utilities Commission recognized for implementing the provisions of this act. That would simply adjust their base appropriation for operating costs. It would increase it by that amount so that they would have the resources to implement this act.
And Madam
Senator
Chair,
Newman?
and the $55,000 in ongoing costs, would it be correct that those would be funds coming out of the general fund?
Mr. Mum?
Madam Chair and Senator Newman, yes, the appropriation is initially made from the general fund. However, has been noted, the commission has assessment authority to recover those costs from the utilities that they regulate. So there would be an offsetting revenue of the same amount, resulting in a net zero cost to the general fund.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Newman?
Just as a suggestion, we have adhered very strictly to a no supplemental budget program this year, given our financial circumstances. I understand what is being said here is that these costs coming out of the general fund can be assessed back. I don't see any language that says they are going to be assessed back. My suggestion would be to put into the amendment or into the bill similar language that we have used for all of the other COVID expenses, that they're not available unless they in fact are assessed back. Otherwise, I would not be in support of appropriating general fund money at this time. So that would be my suggestion around the conundrum on the general fund assessment.
Mr. Baum, is that something that's that is required? Is that comfort language, or is this just,
Madam Chair?
what is assumed from this amendment?
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I believe Eric Nauman would like to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Nauman.
So, Madam Chair, I understand the point that Senator Newman is trying to get at. And in many cases, when general fund expenditures related to the coronavirus have come before the committee, there was effectively that made some good sense. I think in this particular case, there's a more tenuous nature to it, that this would not be specifically COVID related. And so the language that we have used in this committee in the past to essentially ensure that it be a coronavirus relief federal expenditure probably would not be appropriate in this circumstance.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I ask just a quick question?
Actually, Senator Benson is next, and then we've got a long list, Senator Champion, so we'll get to you.
I am just to this point on the fiscal note. It has been my experience under health licensing boards, when we add fees that can be assessed to professional organizations at the Department of Health, that the fiscal note actually reflects if general fund money goes out, there might be a shift and pullback of general fund money, but it shows it balancing out. And so I do not understand why, if something can be assessed, and that is the norm in practice, a fiscal note was prepared that doesn't show us recovering that money. And so maybe Mr. Nauman can explain the difference to me, but when we assess, for example, on the radon bill, we're assessing extra charges onto an industry. For a time, we need some general fund money to go into that special account, but then it backfills. And you can clearly see on the fiscal note that in the budget window, it balances out to zero. So I don't know why we're not doing that on this fiscal note.
Mr. Nauman?
So, Madam Chair and Senators, I'll confess we're going to need a little bit of a few moments here to get a precise answer to that question. We do believe that there's general authority for assessing that appropriation back, but we want to make sure that we give you a precise answer. So if you give us a few moments, we'll circle back to that point.
And Mr. Nauman, while you're seeking that answer, if it doesn't show up as coming back to the general fund, does the PUC get to keep that assessed money? So in fact, right now, what it looks like, this fiscal note is saying we're going to take general fund money, give it to the PUC, and be silent on what happens to the funds that are assessed. So I'd like absolute clarity for getting this general fund money back.
Madam Chair and Senator Benson, I certainly understand the point that you're making. The one thing I can offer for you is that the A58 language in both paragraphs A and B say that the appropriation is for implementing the relevant provisions of this act. So it's my view that if they couldn't spend the appropriation on the specific, or if we over appropriated, for example, as a legislature to this activity, if we appropriated too much and they couldn't spend it on that activity, it would only be obligatable, to make up a word, for that aspect of their work, and any overage would then cancel at a later date.
And
Senator
Madam
Benson.
Chair, I'm sorry, I know you don't have much committee time for this, but my concern is if it's actually accessible and the PUC is going to send general fund money back, we should see that on the fiscal note. This isn't about cancellation. Money back, I need to see it on the fiscal note.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Nauman.
to that point,
Senator Kiffmeyer.
thank you. I would like to have an amendment drafted to address what Senator Newman brought up and also Senator Benson that would clearly state it in the language of the bill that these costs would be recoverable through the mechanism that's already in statute. But I think we need to make it clear, not so much in the fiscal note, but I think this is language that should be in the bill itself, addressing those kinds of costs. And I would like an amendment drafted to do such. So it is clear that it is not going to end up being from the general fund.
Okay. So members and Senator Senjem, we are on a tight time frame. I think we're going to have to come back on this. And I know Ms. Fontaine wants to talk, but we may have to just lay this over and come back a little later because I know we need to.
Absolutely no problem. Madam Chair, there was always a presumption in my mind that this was an automatic process, but I can absolutely understand the need to make it, to tighten that up and to make it an absolute.
Okay. So with that, I know Ms. Fontaine, you can work on that amendment and with Senator Kiffmeyer and we can.
The only thing, Senator Rosen, Madam Chair, I was just going to say, if someone from Commerce, I believe I'm looking at the statute 216B62, which allows for assessments of specific utilities. And it talks about the process and that the utilities have to pay within 30 days to the Treasury, et cetera, et cetera. And so I do think there's a mechanism, but maybe I'll just cite that in the amendment. But if maybe someone can confirm that with me, that there is, it is something that has to happen by statute, and maybe that would be comfort. So I will work on that if you want to move on to the other.
Move on to the other bill. Senator Kiffmeyer?
Yes, or listen to the testifiers, uses time to listen to testifiers, and I suspect by the time they're done, we'll be able to have the amendment ready.
And yeah, I think at this point, though, Senator Kiffmeyer, I'm going to ask Commissioner Kelly for his interpretation of Ms. Fontaine. Is that correct? Are we good with that?
Yes, that would be wonderful if the department could weigh in on or not. That mechanism will require the utilities. Yes, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Yeah, Madam Chair, due to this, I think, I don't know if I've officially offered an amendment, but I would officially withdraw the amendment for now.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We've got a little bit more work to do to clarify this. So at this point, if that's okay, Senator Senjem, we're going to lay this on the table. And we may have to come back this afternoon after your session, or
Sure.
we'll bring this back up. Okay.
All right. We have a binding bill to work on.
Yeah.
And Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Champion.
While they're looking at that, I just wanted to make sure because that this cost cannot be passed to ratepayers, because if it could be, then I wanted to make sure that I try to prepare an amendment so that cost cannot be passed on to ratepayers.
Okay, thank you. Senator Champion, maybe we could work on that too offline throughout the day also. Senator Champion,
yes, ma'am.
Senator Senjem, before we let you go, what is the difference between this bill and the House bill? Because I think there's quite a bit of confusion between what is being proposed at the House side and what you have in Senate File 1456.
Madam Chair and members, I may defer to Commissioner Kelly a little bit on this. I know he's been working both sides, but the House bill, amongst at least one thing, is I'm not sure 100% by 2050 or so. It's one of these. Again, I call it a bumper sticker provision that this bill certainly does not contain. So the House bill would not have the nuclear moratorium in it, as I recall. It would not have carbon capture in it. So the House bill is perhaps from an environmental point of view a little purer But again, this is a bill we worked on to try to find middle ground and anticipate that in the case of some of these provisions, or at least modalities, energy modalities, we have to use them to get the gap off the traditional energy sources into renewable energy.
Thank you, Senator Senjem. Okay, and I don't think Commissioner Kelly wants to respond. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, there are some differences between the two bills. The House bill reflects more of the administration's provisions related to this, and I will just note that we appreciate Senator Senjem's general direction on this bill, and it is consistent with what the governor and lieutenant governor have been advocating, but that there are some provisions added on the Senate side, including demand side management and the particular nature of the transmission study and the cost recovery related to transmission that the department does have concerns about from a ratepayer perspective. But I will just stop there because I know you want to move on to other topics.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Okay, with that, members, we're going to lay Senate File 1456 on the table. Thank you, Senator Senjem. We will get back to you. And
Thank
right
you very
now,
much.
members, thank you. We have Senate File 2084, Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This file is, or this Senate file is a agreement between the House and the Governor's Office regarding spending out of the Renewable Development Account. As many of you know, the Renewable Development Account is a fund that is funded by the fees or taxes on the casks that are at Monticello and Prairie Island. This bill was negotiated last week, and I will first recognize, keep saying Senator Kelly, but Commissioner Kelly, for his leadership in helping bring sides together and getting this across the finish line, hopefully soon. The components are four. There are four spending provisions in this bill. One is the Prairie Island Net Zero project Senator Goggin has advocated for. He does have a standalone bill, I believe, currently in finance. This appropriates $46.2 million from the Renewable Development Account for their net zero project. This was supported by my committee and was passed to finance, as I said. This funding will be paid out in 3 increments. That is a provision that the House requested for, and I acceded to during negotiations. The 3 other provisions are, one provision is to extend an additional funding for the solar rewards program through Xcel Energy. Currently in I believe it's fiscal 22, and Mr. Mumm is here and can correct me. In fiscal 22, we had a $5 million appropriation for solar rewards. Generally speaking, we have had increments of $10 million being appropriated for solar rewards program going forward. So there's an additional $5 million added to what's called the final year of the current solar rewards funding. That is an acknowledgement and bow to the House's request to have that additional funding. There's also an additional year added on to solar rewards. I believe that is for fiscal 23. That is consistent with, again, that $10 million per year that we have invested in solar rewards. Solar rewards, members, is a program that provides incentive or financing and incentive for solar energy in Minnesota. It actually is very important to the burgeoning solar industry we have here, that it actually, especially during this pandemic, would provide additional funding that is jobs in Minnesota. The final 2 provisions, one is for a turbine replacement in Granite Falls. Technically speaking, that is not within the ratepayer area, but it is encompassed and surrounded by Xcel ratepayer area. And also there is a decommissioned plant for NSP, which still has NSP on the plant itself. Of course, we know that's now Xcel Energy that is in that vicinity. This replaces a turbine that is inoperable and provides energy, which was unanimously supported by my committee. The final provision is a host cities, what's commonly referred to as the host cities provision, and that is from Senator Housley. That is $2 million for, I'm sorry, on Granite Falls, that was $2.7 million. I did not identify that. For the host cities provision, that is $2 million for the purposes of dealing with the economic and job impacts of the termination of current coal-fired power plants or fossil fuel power plants as we do transition going forward into a cleaner energy grid. This is something, again, that Senator Housley brought forward. It has been unanimously supported in the past. It is not a general appropriation from the general fund. We did have a separate ride-along, a standalone bill that has been referred to finance from Senator Housley that actually had both a general and a RDA appropriation. I know Senator Ingebretson has been interested in this because he is going to have a plant, the Hout plant, that is going to be decommissioned that he would like to have additional funding for. That is not in this bill. We have negotiated this very tightly with the governor's office and with the House, and is universally supported so far between the three parties involved. This bill was seen in my committee earlier this week. It did pass with 9 votes of the present members to go forward. So with that, members, I'd stand for any questions, and I hope I have your support.
Thank you, Senator Osmek. Mr. Malm, could you please go through the RDA fund balance and what we have in, and members, you should have a spreadsheet, something similar to this available online. Mr. Malm, you're on mute. Mr. Malm. Mr. Malm, you're on mute. There you go.
Madam Chair, I apologize.
No problem.
The balance for the renewable development account can be.
Oh, Mr. Malm, you're on mute again. There you go.
I apologize. I'm switching between screens, and for some reason that triggers the mute function. Madam Chair, the balance for the renewable development account after the spending changes outlined by Senator Osmek can be found on line 20 of the spreadsheet. So if you look at the column under the set of columns under the blue header with the bill number, you see the resulting balance after those changes. At the end of this biennium, there's about $58.5 million left in the renewable development account. At the end of the next biennium, that balance is $73.325 million.
Okay, thank you. I know there are some people that would like to talk. Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Kiffmeyer, you're on mute. There we go.
Sorry, Madam Chair, should have gotten ready. In regards, is this the time to do questions about the fiscal note, or is that going to come?
Absolutely, yes, and then we'll go into amendments. I know there's some amendments.
Okay, well, in regards to this on the fiscal note, in here, the Public Utilities Commission says they can implement the additional resource selection and would not need additional funding, but the process will be more complex. So I don't quite understand why on this bill we have this kind of a fiscal note when it's more complex, but somehow they're absorbing it. That just
Senator Kiffmeyer, I think we're on Senator Osmek's 2084. I think you're still delving into the.
Nope.
No, you're on. Okay, where are you at then on the bill?
I'm looking at these online, so it would be Madam Chair, you can go to somebody else.
Okay.
I'll find it again I was in an email. I will go back to the committee list.
Thank you very much. Senator Westrom.
Madam Chair, I had a question, and then I do have an amendment, but I can wait with that until further questions if there's if that's better.
You're the only one, you and Senator Kiffmeyer, so go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I could just have fiscal staff repeat that, if I understood correctly, the fund would remain with about 58 million in it for projects that haven't been expended or could be expended. Is that correct?
Mr. Mum?
Madam Chair, Senator Westrom, that is correct. 58.5 million at the end of the current biennium.
Senator Westrom?
Very good. Madam Chair, that I thought I heard that right, and I knew there was a healthy amount in this account. Madam Chair, I would move the amendment, and I forget the number. Maybe Mr. Bodden can remind me of the number of an amendment, and then I'll explain it.
Yes,
Mr.
Bodden.
A5 amendment. I can
A5 amendment,
that
okay.
now.
Yes, and that should be showing up. Members, Senator Westrom moves the A5 amendment. Senator Westrom?
Madam Chair, members, this amendment would add two projects that have been come to light. One is a project in Morris at the West Central Research and Outreach Center, where they've nearly 18 years ago started a big focus on renewable energy. They have an impressive operation that really does focus on practical research and ways of delivering renewable energy, both at the Research and Outreach Center, working with the main Twin Cities campus, but also the University of Minnesota Morris campus. We have funded some different projects. Sometimes they work very well, sometimes unexpected things happen. And I have said this over and over and over, that's the perfect place for research to happen. But they've got an opportunity with the position they are in. They aggressively go after new projects, new ideas, and they've got their small anhydrous ammonia plant that converts wind energy to anhydrous ammonia, but they have pursued a project from the United States Department of Energy that's would be a $10 to $15 million of additional grant money if they can come up with local match. And they are in the top running of one of two sites, I understand, to have this pilot project working with the grant through the United States Department of Energy, and the pilot project on anhydrous ammonia, which in essence would be a chemical battery for storage for renewable energy, whether it's comes from solar, wind. One of the big challenges in this renewable energy arena is battery or storage capabilities. Well, anhydrous ammonia proves a lot of this, proves positive to be a very practical way to chemically store energy and use it later to turn it back into electricity. And so this is an exciting project, and they are leaders in the country. And this would be a great opportunity for them to take another big step. I understand they have been in quite a bit of communications with Xcel Energy, GRE. They have both spoken positive about this project, as I understand it, and the feedback I've gotten. So this would be a $5.2 million for that match. We had a bill in front of Senator Osmek's committee. Of course, the first day we canceled hearings was the day it was up for a hearing. And so, Madam Chair, that's part of the amendment. The other aspect is an important project up in Senator Tomassoni's district, $3.8 million for an expansion of the only solar panel processing or production plant in Minnesota. And they've got quite a remarkable story up there as well, and have grown from 2 megawatts years ago to, I understand, upwards of 120 megawatts of panels that they make, and they are bursting at the seams, and would use it for some assistance to expand that solar production capacity. in our state. And so, Madam Chair, I would urge our members to add this. That's why I wanted to know the dollars, but I knew there was a fair amount of money. The RDA does have a focus towards renewable development. Used to be the RDF, for those of you remembering, Renewable Development Fund. It was part of the trade-off and compromise with the nuclear Prairie Island cask storage back in the 90s. We had the Prairie Island 2 bill in 2003. And these dollars are to develop. In 2003, as the chief author of the Prairie Island bill in the House at the time, I worked with Governor Pawlenty, focusing a lot on this ability to have extra storage. Hydrogen research was a big focus as well, and that's when they, in that bill, it established the hydrogen and renewable energy research at the University of Minnesota. That 10 million was committed. That was part of the birth of the great, that was part of the birth of the renewable energy research that has started and been going on at the Morris Research Center. And they are a great campus, a great location for a pilot project, rural, practical. They have the space, they have the staff and the teamwork. And so, Madam Chair, I would urge members to support this as part of our renewable development account. When we've got promising projects, that's what we want this account to be going for.
Thank you, Senator Westrom. Senator Franzen to the A5 amendment, is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Westrom, for bringing this conversation forward with this amendment. I certainly like to support my good friend, Senator Tomassoni, and the Iron Range. I know that we've had a really hard time right now with mines being closed with this pandemic, and this is something to have a discussion about whether it's appropriate or not for this account. I'll let the subject matter experts weigh in on that. But I do appreciate the talk about funding projects that are research-based with the University of Minnesota, especially in Morris, and leveraging federal dollars that can actually go to technology that's really needed in this industry. And it all translates to jobs, jobs, jobs. So I appreciate both aspects of the amendment. I would like to know what the department thinks about them, but certainly think that leveraging those federal dollars, and if we're one of 2 sites in the country that's up for grabs, I think that's an area that we should really explore seriously, and it's not coming from the general fund. And in terms of the jobs for more production of solar panels, it's the only one we have in the state. So it's in our best interest to keep it open and have those jobs in rural Minnesota. So I appreciate the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Franzen. We will have Commissioner Kelly respond to this amendment, but I'd like to get through a couple more questions. Senator Cohen.
Madam Chair, not a question, but just let me follow up with Senator Franzen. I'd actually been asked to offer by Senator Tomassoni the amendment that, at least the Mount Iron portion of the amendment that Senator Westrom offered. And then yesterday I learned that Senator Westrom was going to offer this combined amendment. So we'll just my supplemental support for whatever that might be worth, because I had a chance then to look at some of the numbers that Senator Westrom has relative to Mount Iron and found it to be, I'm not an expert, but found it to be pretty impressive in terms of the growth of the solar panel industry and its ability to generate more jobs, more solar energy. So hope members would support it.
Thank you, Senator Cohen. Senator Hayden. Senator Hayden, yeah.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I also had become aware of this, and though I'm not an expert at all in a lot of these things, it sounds to me that in Morris, the research component, especially around battery storage, makes a lot of sense. And then certainly, we know that our economy is strained, and especially on the range. Frankly, I think that there are new industries that are starting to develop on the range that I think is going to be good for Minnesota. So if this helps with that, I certainly want to support it.
Thank you, Senator Hayden. Commissioner Kelly, could we have a response, and then we'll turn to Senator Osmek.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to respond. I should have said for the record earlier, I'm Steve Kelly. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Commerce. The governor and lieutenant governor submitted a supplemental budget earlier in the year that contained recommendations related to spending from the Renewable Development Account. These two projects were not in the governor's recommended programs. So the department does not take a position on these two things, except to note that they were not in the provisions provided by the governor and lieutenant governor. But I also want to say, consistent with the points that Senator Osmek made, is that developing this particular RDA proposal was a challenging negotiation, and I appreciated Senator Osmek's work on it and the work of the Energy Committee staff. And I would not want to see, in addition to this proposal, that would potentially obstruct passage in the House and lead to the possibility that we would not complete the effort to get the funds that are contained in Senator Osmek's bill out and working in the community through construction of the project at Prairie Island and the solar rewards and the other projects that are in this proposal. So the department stands by the agreement that we worked out with Senator Osmek and would oppose additions to this bill.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with everything that Commissioner Kelly said. This was a very tightly constructed spending bill. There are four very important items in it, and we have not agreed to that. However, I will say that I do like both of the proposals, and I would suggest Senator Westrom and Senator Tomassoni, who is involved in this amendment, perhaps to continue to discuss this with the administration and with the House to see if there is perhaps a floor amendment or some additional pathway for this. But at this point, I do have to oppose this because it does put in jeopardy those four proposals that we have all agreed upon between the three parties. And I don't want to jeopardize those at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Osmek. Any further questions, comments on the A5 amendment? Oh, Senator Marty, there you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. They may be both very good projects. I think anhydrous may be a great energy storage thing, and Morris does very creative things. I understand that. And our solar panel manufacturer may be appropriate. I guess I'm just questioning the idea. This is the last Friday of the session in Finance Committee. Just all of a sudden, again, I think Senator Osmek and the House author and the administration worked out a good package. These sound like good projects. I just think that this is something that could be pushed a little more earlier in the session, a little more thoughtfully, so people have more chance to vet them and hear pros and cons of them, not just legislators say, hey, this is a really wonderful project. Hope you support it, which is the way things often happen. But I guess I'm more concerned about the way the process is going than that. And I think I'll second what Senator Osmek said. You know, maybe they should do some negotiations with the House and the administration, and maybe it should be added. But Friday morning in Finance Committee, the last weekend of the session, seems a strange time to pop. It looks like a 13. I didn't total the two projects up, but significant, expensive project.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Okay, Senator Westrom, I think we'll, I don't see any other hands up.
Okay.
Senator Westrom, briefly, please.
If I could ask the commissioner a question. Commissioner Kelly, have you looked at, are you aware of either of these projects? My understanding is you probably are. Can you just comment on them? I understand the idea of agreements. You know, we always try to uphold agreements, but there's also a time for everybody else to have bills heard. As I said, this bill for the Morris project was up the day they canceled hearings because of COVID-19. So it's not the first time or first thing that's had to go through a unprecedented or an unusual process. Any comments you could just offer us as a committee about these projects, if you've got a negative view of them based on what you know, that'd be fine to share with us. But I understand you probably do know some of these projects, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot about the agreement. I understand that, but if you could offer us feedback as the commissioner working on some of these proposals, as that's your subject area.
Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair, Senator Westrom, I will just start by reiterating 2 points. The administration supports the current deal, and with respect to other projects, the administration had its own proposals earlier in the year. So I'm not in a position to say something different than that. From a personal point of view, as you suggest, Senator, I am familiar with the Morris project because during my time at the University of Minnesota, I worked with the team at the Twin Cities campus and the Morris facility on their existing project. And I'm familiar with the proposal that they plan to submit to the to ARPA-E. And I do think it is a meritorious project, but I think it needed to be heard in the regular process, and regret that COVID-19 pandemic interfered with that regular process.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. And Senator Westrom, real briefly, we have a few more questions and then we need to vote on the amendment, please.
Okay.
Okay. Senator Cohen, you still have your hand up? Further comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just a quick comment. I've indicated before that this is a very unusual year, an unusual process, but it is a culmination of a process that's been going in the last number of years predating the current Senate majority. I can only suggest to Commissioner Kelly and the comments he's made that, Commissioner, I served with you during all of your time in the state Senate, and as a state senator, you wouldn't have supported a process like this in a million years. And I can make some facetious comments, Madam Chair, about what might take place, not relative to this bill, but legislative process over the next several months. But again, you and I have talked about this, and I'll at some point speak on the floor in a little bit more detail. But we're using this emergency and the need to change the legislative process, I would suggest, is more of an excuse than necessary for turning the legislative process upside down.
Thank you, Senator Cohen. Senator Benson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Westrom, I appreciate you working on items of passion. As I look at the rural development, I'm sorry, not the renewable energy development account, that all came from ratepayers. And how many of those ratepayers have had their business shut down since the middle of March? Still had to keep the power on so that their facilities could be properly maintained in the hopes that they'll reopen. And so Senator Westrom and frankly, Senator Osmek, I'm not sure the spending out of this account is the next best use of this money. And that perhaps we should be looking at giving some one-time rebates to businesses. And so Senator Westrom, I am not going to support your amendment in part because I want to respect the wishes of the author, and I try to do that. But also because I look at a pot of money that is under legislative authority, and I think about the people who have had to do without. And so I think perhaps some thoughtfulness about rebates to the customers who've been paying this, and certainly not to drain the account, that would be irresponsible, but some sort of rebate to show a bit of empathy to the people who have paid this money and who are now wondering if they're ever going to open their doors again. And so, Senator Westrom, my apologies, but I will be opposing your amendment.
Thank you, Senator Benson. Senator Osmek.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Benson. I have been working on a rebate program that actually is a bill that was referred to finance. The reason that is not, excuse me, the reason that is not part of this is once again for the same reason that the amendment that Senator Westrom is putting in is not part of the agreement. It was not agreed upon by all of the parties involved. Again, there is a fund balance, and I think we're probably going to have perhaps a special session. I'm going to continue to work on that to see if there is some place for agreement. But as you stated, or as it has been stated, this is a deal that I think if we blow this bill up with additional amendments, we're going to lose some projects that are very important. But I will continue to work on that, and we do have an opportunity for that rebate to occur. It's just not part of this deal.
Senator Western, final comments, and we really do need to take a vote. Thank you.
Madam Chair, a question for maybe Commissioner Kelly. What is the annual dollars that are put into this account? If you can refresh the committee, 58 million will be existing dollars. There's more that will be put in there next year. And Senator Benson, I appreciate your comments. This would far from deplete the account. I don't know how big of a rebate program might be contemplated, but there'd still be nearly $50 million left unspent in these dollars that are targeted towards renewable development account. That's the purpose of these dollars. And so maybe Commissioner Kelly, if you can remind us, what is the annual appropriation that goes into this account? Just so members know the account would continue to grow. And then
Mr. Mum, I'll let you answer that, please.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Madam Chair and Senator Westrom, on the spreadsheet that was distributed, line 4 shows the revenue payment that is deposited into the renewable development account from Xcel Energy. Currently, it's the annual amount is just under $15 million. By fiscal year 2023, that increases to about 30 million, and that's because several of the spending obligations that Xcel Energy currently has expire in that time. So yes, to your point, Senator Westrom, that revenue that is incoming into the fund is between $15 and $30 million a year.
Thank you, Mr. Mum.
Thank you, Mr. Mum. And Madam Chair, do you have any further comments from any other members?
No. No, Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, Senator Westrom, again, as I said, I'm very open to the projects myself. I just very concerned. I'm told they were introduced early on, and as you had mentioned, yours didn't get a hearing because of COVID, and Senator Tomassoni's, I assume, similar reasons. But I think this is worth pursuing. I'm just saying that springing it the last minute and first time hearing of it, it's not the best way to deal with it. And I hope you'll consider, if this goes down, I hope you'll consider working with the author and with the House and so on, because I think they may have great merit. I'm just saying, springing it the last minute and hey, here's what we're seeing about is what you're telling us.
And
Senator Westrom.
Madam Chair and Senator Marty, I'm trying to read, is that a yes vote for it today because you like it, or a no vote because of the process? Madam Chair and
Madam
Senator
Chair,
Marty,
no vote for today, but open to it, very open to it, whether on the floor or special session. Just want to hear more, and I think we ought to be talking to the House and Governor about it as well, so we don't pull up the whole package.
and Madam Chair, Senator Marty, and if this bill would have been up a week ago, I could have offered it a week and a half before the end of session. Some of that is just out of our control, and many things come in the last 3-4 days of session. Madam Chair, hearing the comments, I appreciate the strong support for it. I would like to pursue this with Senator Tomassoni, the governor's office, the author, and the House, and try to get this worked out. I think there's got to be a path. There's funds in here. Madam Chair, just temporarily, I would withdraw this amendment for now with some of the comments, but Senator Marty, I don't want you to have an illusion that it might not come back up on the floor because we are short of time, and I think that's the only option and only opportunity to make it happen otherwise. But I'd like to talk to you and some others a little bit further. And Madam Chair, I'd withdraw this right now for this committee right now, and I'll keep talking about this with the author as well.
Thank you, Senator Westrom. Withdraws the A5 amendment. Senator Marty.
I'd ordinarily advise against what Senator Westrom is suggesting, but I think that is actually a better process right now. So I and others can be more familiar with it, and so we can hear what the House and the administration feel about it as well. So happy to work with you.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
No, if Senator Westrom is going to, I just would like to ask for one point of clarity on this. Where does this money come from? Does it come from the ratepayers or does it come from the cash storage?
Senator Osmek.
Senator Westrom, Madam Chair, Senator Westrom, both. It comes from the ratepayers as a result of the fees or taxes, depending on your perspective, that are paid on an annual basis for the casks that are stored at Prairie Island and Monticello. It does not have any general fund money. It comes exclusively from those casks.
Senator Ingebrigtsen, good. Okay. Is there any further comments, questions?
So, Madam Chair.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yes, I'd like to have Mr. Kelly address the issue. This is money that came from ratepayers, seemed more appropriate to have it go back to ratepayers. And if we're subsidizing one area at the expense of other ratepayers. So, Mr. Kelly, could you address the issue of whether you support rebates out of this account? That this is extra money the ratepayers paid and it should go back to the ratepayers. Could you address that issue? Do you support rebates?
Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair and Senator Kiffmeyer, this account goes back to 1993 when the initial decision was made to store radioactive waste outside the containment vessel at Prairie Island. And the account was set up to move the state towards renewable energy and potentially act as an incentive to Xcel to try to find a long-term storage site for this waste. So the spending proposed in Senator Osmek's bill is consistent with that original purpose of this account, and we support that and a rebate to consumers. The governor, Lieutenant Governor, have not taken a final position on that. I will just say that at first glance, the rebate is not consistent with the original purposes of this account that was established by the legislature.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
No, that's it. I just wanted to find out where the issue is. And
thank you. Senator Osmek, I do have an amendment that I have drawn up, and I am not going to offer it. It's the A4 amendment. It's on the Benson biomass business compensation because I respect your negotiations with this bill that you've brought forward. But I do want to state for the record that I'm very disappointed that Benson biomass has not been addressed in the last 4 years. I think because of the renewable development account and what the Benson biomass and the involvement with the account, that I think this compensation for the folks that have been compromised by the closure of the Benson biomass and Laurentian and all the above the other ones, I think it's appropriate to take it out of the RDA, and it would be $40 million. I'm very disappointed that this has not been addressed. You have made several comments that it should be coming from the claims department, and I think Senator Cohen, myself, would say that the claims department is not prepared. That's out of the general fund, and is not prepared to handle something of that size. But like I said, I'm not going to offer it, but I want to say that this is a big disappointment. And because of that, I will not be voting for your 2084. Do you have final comments, Senator?
Well, Senator Rosen, in response to that, 2 points. One, you will note that the biomass, $40 million biomass compensation was part of the 2018 omnibus bill that was vetoed by Governor Dayton. That did get across the finish line. I did work to get that in. So we did have that fund available in 2018. It's just unfortunate that the veto did impact that. And as a result of the 2018 election, we have different leadership in the House, and we are well aware of that. I, as recently as yesterday, and Commissioner Kelly is on the line, I spoke with him regarding the governor's position on the biomass. He is still working. I haven't gotten a complete answer yet from him, but I did inquire into the House chair of energy, and I was given an unconditional no. So, Senator Rosen, if I had forced the biomass in, and we do have a fund balance at the bottom, I would not have a bill. I would be surrendering all 4 of these good projects at the expense of a project that the House unconditionally will not accept. I understand the problems that are going on with Benson. I understand what the concerns of Senator Lang are, but I cannot make a deal with that as part of the deal. So it's unfortunate. I do believe that the claims process should be used in this case. But in response to your comments, I cannot surrender 4 good projects for something that is absolutely not going to pass in the House. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Osmek. I would question the one big project of 46.2 million, if that's a good project. The devil is in the details, and I certainly hope that we're not, that we will see a good result, but I have grave questions about that project. Senator Benson, you had your hand up, but you don't have it up anymore.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to echo support for your position. Frankly, the next time somebody comes to Energy Committee selling some flim-flam promise about renewables, remember how hard it is to actually make it work. And that's what happened to the folks in Benson. They trusted people, that trust was broken, and now it was a renewable energy promise that was broken. It is absolutely appropriate. It comes out of the Renewable Energy Fund and not out of claims.
Thank you, Senator Benson. That's how I feel too. Okay, with that, any other questions, comments, final comments? Senator Osmek, I don't see any hands up.
Well, thank you, members. I would only suggest out of the Claims Committee that it isn't necessarily that it would have to come from the general fund because of, and I was on Claims Committee, you can actually write a bill that says that the $40 million from the Claims Committee comes out of the RDA account because that is under legislative control now. So it isn't necessarily something that is impossible, but the Claims Committee would have a better jurisdiction over how that comes about. But nonetheless, I appreciate the discussion today. Senator Rosen, I understand your concerns over the Prairie Island money. I think it is a worthy project that starts down the path of clean energy, and the fact that it does go, at least on a test case, go to prove whether a net zero can be accomplished in a small micro environment. So I appreciate the discussion, and I appreciate you taking up the bill today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Osmek. So we have Senate File 2084 before us. Who would like to move the bill?
Okay, bye-bye.
Madam Chair, I will.
Senator Westrom moves that Senate File 2084 be recommended to pass and placed on general orders. All those in favor say aye. Excuse me. Turn off your video and raise.
Turn on the video.
Turn on your video and turn off your mute. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
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 No.
The motion prevails. The bill is passed to general orders. Thank you, Senator Osmek. And members, I think we are just about at the end. We're going to have to. I would really like to bring back Senator Senjem's bill and have a more thorough discussion today. And if you would indulge me in that, I think that would be very appropriate to have that discussion. So with that, we are in recess. Thank you.
Alert. Senator Scott Newman has left the meeting.